Okay then, well, good afternoon. You're listening to the News, Views and Interviews European Election Special with Jane Morris on Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM. Now, for the next hour, you can hear the views and opinions of the candidates from 9 of the parties that are standing in the election next Thursday, the 22nd of May. Now, the European Parliament will be elected from the 22nd to the 25th of May this year for the next 5-year term, and it legislates jointly with on the EU policy with the Council of the European Union. Now, as the only EU body directly elected by EU voters, the Parliament represents the EU's 500 million inhabitants. It's one of the EU's main lawmaking institutions, along with the Council of European Union, which represents the governments of the EU member countries. So that's what we're being asked to vote for next Thursday. But what do we really know about the European Parliament? Well, I've got a very brief, in fact, potted history for you. The European Union was set up at the end of the Second World War with the aim of ending the frequent wars in Europe. The 6 founder members were Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg and the Netherlands. The UK actually joined in 1973 along with Denmark and Ireland, and the election of MEPs directly only began in 1979. Greece, Spain and Portugal joined in the 80s, and the single market was completed by 1993 with its 4 freedoms. They are the movement of goods, services, people and money. 95 saw Austria, Finland and Sweden joined, and in the 1st of January 1999 the euro was launched and actually became the official currency of 11 of the member states. 12 more countries joined in the 2000s, and the European Parliament now is currently made up of 28 member countries with 750 elected MEPs after the elections on Thursday. Now, the UK itself is represented by 73 MEPs. Wales has 4. But unlike other elections, for example, the parliamentary or the assembly or the council elections, where you vote for a candidate, in the European elections, we have 1 vote for a party list. Now, I'm joined by, like I said, 9 candidates from 9 of the different parties. Now, let me introduce you the candidates for today's debate. First of all, we have Kay Swinburne from the Conservative Party. Hello, Kay.
Good morning.
And then we have Pippa Bartolotti from the Green Party. Hello, Pippa.
Hi, good morning.
We have next Alex Thomas from the Labour Party.
Hello.
And we have next Alec Dauncey from the Liberal Democrats.
Hello.
And Rob Griffiths from No to EU.
Yes to workers' rights.
Okay.
On the ballot paper.
Hello, Rob. We have Johan Bellin from Plaid Cymru.
Hello, everyone.
And next we've got Andrew Jordan from Socialist Labour Party.
Good afternoon.
And Brian Johnson from the Socialist Party of Great Britain.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Okay. And David Rowlands from the UK Independence Party, otherwise known as UKIP.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon to you all. Now, don't forget, as listeners, you can get involved too with your questions or comments, either via the text, which is probably the best way to do it, on 07728 758 759, or you can give us a call on the hotline on 02920 235 664. Right, we need to get on with the debate as we have a lot of people in the studio. I'm going to start off with, well, it's the elephant in the room, isn't it? It's what everybody's been talking about. The first question is, do you think Wales should be in the European Union? I'm going to give you each about a minute to answer the question, and I'm going to start off with Kay Swinburne from the Conservative Party.
Thank you. I've been an MEP for the last 5 years, and as a sitting MEP, it's been interesting to see the differences in the European Union over the last 5 years, and in particular, since we've had a Conservative-led government in Westminster, our entire relationship with the EU is already changing. So I do believe, and I'm certainly standing this time round, in a 3R strategy. I'm actually standing on reform, renegotiation, and then giving the people of Wales and the UK a referendum on an in-out choice on Europe. So it's an interesting question for me, because I believe following renegotiation, and I think renegotiation is happening already and can happen more every single time we go to the table to discuss, I believe David Cameron will put a package on the table by 2017 that will mean that I'll be able to say yes to staying in the EU.
Okay, thank you, Kay. Next, we've got Pippa Bartolotti, from the Green Party.
Hi, yes, got my name right this time. Well, Greens are very keen that we stay in the EU. We think it's good for Wales. Wales gets more from the EU than it ever would from the Westminster government. So we are a definite yes to reform. There's a lot of work to be done at an EU level. We're a definite yes for a referendum, but we are a yes to the EU. Without the EU, in Wales, our country would be poorer. It would be more oppressive. It would be smellier. and we really would not have the opportunities to raise particularly poor areas such as West Wales and the valleys up to a better standard of living.
Okay, very quickly, because you haven't had your full minute, why would Wales be smellier?
Well, think of the Water Quality Act, for example. Our beaches are cleaner, not because of anything that our government or the UK government has done, but because of the European Union.
Okay, thank you for that. Next up, we've got Alex Thomas from the Labour Party.
191,000 jobs due to EU trade, billions of funding coming from the European Union, defence of your right to paid holiday, to maternity pay, to the same protection for part-time workers as full-time workers. Those are just a handful of reasons why we need to stay in Europe, and why from the Labour Party it's an ambiguous yes, we benefit from Europe.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Next, we've got Alec Dauncey from the Lib Dems.
Thanks. The Welsh Liberal Democrats are clearly the party of in Europe, in work, because we see the massive link between jobs in Wales, jobs in Britain, perhaps 3 million jobs that are related to our trade with the European Union. The European Union needs to be managed to do that. It needs to be managed politically and democratically, and that's what electing members of the European Parliament are all about. The question was, what does Wales get out of being in the European Union? Wales is a net beneficiary. That's because we get the structural funds and our farmers get agricultural funding. So it's an important part of Wales's economy being in the European Union. The key is to get stuck in and make it work. The introduction set out how it worked. That was really good. The European Parliament is elected, so you are represented in Brussels. You're also represented in the Council of Ministers by our governments. It's about, we've got the clearest vision of Wales in Britain, in Europe, that is modern and progressive and tolerant.
Okay, thank you for that, Alec. Next up, we've got Rob Griffiths from No to EU.
Well, we don't think Wales or any other country should be part of such a fundamentally anti-democratic big business club as the European Union. Many millions of people across Europe are protesting against the vicious austerity and privatisation measures that are being driven through by the European Central Bank and the European Commission and the International Monetary Fund. Of course, those policies don't have to be driven by the EU here, because the Conservative Party, the Lib Dems, Labour and I believe UKIP all support austerity and privatisation. So I'm not surprised that at the end of the day, despite the occasional pretence to be critical or opposed to the EU, they're fundamentally in favour of EU membership. We're on the same side, as I say, of many millions of working people across Europe who realise that this is a big business club that cannot be reformed and is fundamentally anti-democratic. The European Parliament must be about the most powerless elected body in the world.
Okay, thank you for that, Rob. Next up, we've got Johan Bellin from Plaid Cymru.
Well, this election really isn't about whether or not we stay in or come out of Europe. That may come later. But one of the things that we believe in Plaid Cymru is this election is about who can put Wales first and who can actually deliver for the people of Wales and the people of Cardiff. So that's why we're standing. And one of the things, we believe that the European Union has to be reformed. You and I, Jane, and all the listeners are £40 better off because we are actually part of the European Union. We get funds from the European Union. As a former resident of Butetown, you can walk into the new health centre, and that was done because of the money that had come from the European Union, as is Radio Cardiff that we're on at the moment. Some European Regional Development Fund money, I think, came to it. And also, 150,000 families depend on those jobs that we need with the trade in, as part of the European Union. All that would be put at risk if we pulled out.
Okay, thank you for that, Johan. I think there's a couple of facts there we may need to check up on, particularly in relation to Radio Cardiff. We certainly don't get any money from the EU at the moment, and we haven't done for a very, very long time. Okay, and next up we've got Andrew Jordan from Socialist Labour.
Okay, so in this election, the Socialist Labour Party is the only party which is both opposing the European Union's free market, privatisation and austerity agendas, and of which is calling for Britain's immediate withdrawal from the EU.
You're not the only one that calls for that, are you?
Well, we're the only party.
So stop
Rob, can you just let Andrew speak, please? Because you were allowed to speak, okay? We can debate it later on.
So we're calling for Britain's immediate withdrawal from the European Union. The European Union has undermined and it's sought to replace our democracy. Now, what I mean by that is, in the introduction, and some of the other parties in here have said how wonderful the European Parliament is. The European Parliament is not the key legislative body of the European Union. There are two other key bodies, one of which is the European Council, which does have the elected leaders of the individual states within it, but we don't directly elect them to that role in the European Council. The other is the European Commission, which is made up entirely of unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats who we have no say over at all. The European Union has dictated policies which have led to mass unemployment. And all of the parties in this election, whether they say they're in, they're out, or quite frankly they don't even know, all of them will carry on the European Union's austerity agenda. Only the Socialist Labour Party is committed to bringing prosperity to communities across Wales.
Okay, thank you for that, Andrew. Next up, we've got Brian Johnson from the Socialist Party of Great Britain.
Right, the SPGB take a unique stance in regards to the European Union. It makes no difference whatsoever whether we're in Europe or out of Europe for the 99% who constitute the wage slaves within Europe and also within the global system. We're up against capitalism. It's capitalism you want to be pointing at and discussing and understanding, and so that you're in a position to bring an end to a rule that ensures that the means of living are held by a small minority and democracy goes right out through the window. It makes no difference whatsoever. We're 99%, and that includes everybody in this room, are members of wage slavery and the wages system.
Okay, thank you for that, Brian. And finally, we have got David Rowlands from UKIP.
Well, of course, UKIP is the largest party in Great Britain calling from a withdrawal from the political union with Europe and going back to a trading partnership with our friends in Europe, which is what we all thought we would join in back in 1995. Europe is all about two groups of people. It's about big business and the political elite. It's not about the working classes of the United Kingdom or any other part of Europe. And I have to agree with my socialist friends here that the pain and the suffering that's being found throughout the whole of Europe is due to the movement of peoples throughout Europe, which is driving down wages in the United Kingdom as it is in the rest of Europe. So we are calling for a withdrawal from Europe. And when these people talk about European money, it's not European money, it's British money coming back to us after the European Union has creamed half that money off. They then tell us exactly where we have to spend it, and we have to match fund that money.
Okay, interesting comments there, Brian. I never thought I'd hear UKIP agreeing with the socialists in the room, but is anyone want to come back now?
Yes, I would like to add something to that, actually. Without a doubt, there is a problem with the corporate takeover of democracy at every level, including the European Union. And Greens would like to see much more transparency, particularly in lobbying. And to explain what I mean by that, at a European level, you'll find perhaps thousands of lobbyists for the fossil fuel industries and the big agrochemical industries. But for someone like Friends of the Earth, perhaps only one lobbyist. So there is this deficiency of democracy at quite a high level, which I think we need to overcome. We need to bring Europe back to where it's answerable to the people who voted for their representatives.
Okay, Kay?
I think it's fair to say, as the only MEP in the room who's currently still an MEP until July 1st, no matter what happens next week, I can safely tell you that there really is a degree of transparency, certainly in my records. I've been there for 5 years and I have published every 6 months a list of all lobbying contacts I've had with the commercial world. And also I see hundreds, if not thousands, of people in terms of constituents and other lobbying activity from the NGOs, the non-government organisations and charities from around Wales and elsewhere. So there can be transparency. I already have transparency in my records. And it's really important to say that I don't listen to one particular group. I listen to everybody. I've also responded to several thousand letters from individual constituents over the years and have pledged I respond to everyone, whether or not they come from big business or whether they're an individual who've got a concern writing to me from within Wales. We can all do that, and I think that's beholden upon the elected members to be transparent and to show everybody what they're doing and who they have contact with. We don't need laws or rules for that. That's about personal ethics and actually living up to what we've said we're going to do.
Okay, Johan?
Well, somebody mentioned the fact that we get European grants, but it's actually our taxpayers' money, which is quite correct. But the other thing, we launched our campaign in the docks in Cardiff, where with a business with the Port Authority, and they said that it's not just about the grants, it's also about the trade that we do, the 150,000 jobs that depend, that's 1 in 10 across Wales of jobs depend on being part of the European Union. So I think that's one of the things that we must consider when it comes to voting on Thursday. And it's only really that Plaid Cymru is the only party that can put Wales first when it comes to the European Parliament and at every level that we stand.
Okay, Rob.
Yes, certainly Britain is a massive net contributor to EU funds, and the Welsh contribution to that, of course, is underestimated because of the whole basis on which tax revenues from Wales are not calculated. And it's a bit sad to see politicians in Wales trying to compete as to who can hold out the biggest begging bowl. The fact is that the EU is not reformable, it's not democratic, it's not transparent, and every time the people of any country have voted against the latest EU treaty, they must hold that vote over again and over again, as in Denmark, as in Ireland, as in other countries, until they come up with the answer that the European Commission has dictated is the only acceptable answer. So it's not reformable, and the Tories want to negotiate a better deal for the City of London. They don't want any regulation of the City of London. The only thing that gets Nigel Farage really excited is when bankers' bonuses might be attacked from Brussels. We say the whole lot is rotten and the peoples of Europe would be better off without the European
Okay,
Union.
thanks for that, Rob. Sorry, I'm going to have Alec and then Alex. Okay.
Well, I'd say we are where we are. We're in a big market. I do think a big market does create prosperity and jobs. That's how the economy works. Yes, it's a capitalist economy. It's a free market economy. If you want to control that for workers' rights or to protect people from asbestosis or whatever, then you have to get stuck in there into the democratic system as best it is. And it does mean electing members of the European Parliament who've got to work hard on the nitty-gritty of all those regulations. It means the right people doing the right things in the Council of Ministers as well. No democratic institution is correct. A lot of the things we're talking about here can be fixed at all sorts of levels. Westminster doesn't work perfectly. Cardiff doesn't work perfectly. We can make Europe work better, and we're getting to get stuck in.
Okay, and Alex?
The candidate from No to EU suggested that Wales was a net contributor to the EU budget. That is fundamentally factually inaccurate. We are a net beneficiary, as has been said twice already. To slightly correct Johan, more recent calculations show that it's £70 more we get back than we put in for every man, woman in Wales. And fundamentally, I'd like to ask No to EU, if it was a capitalist club in the way you describe, would it be defending your rights to paid holidays, to maternity leave, and many other working place rights?
Most of the rights of working people in Wales and Britain have got because we fought for them. That's how we got the Equal Pay Act, that's how we got the Health and Safety at Work Act. And the fact that one or two decisions have actually gone in favour instead of the majority which go against workers' rights, one or two have gone in favour, really doesn't change the overall balance. The European Union is dominated by the big multinational corporations. That's why, for example, the European Parliament can't even initiate its own legislation, whether on workers' rights or anything else.
Okay, thanks for that, Rob. Okay. I'll take a final comment from.
Just very quickly. We are net contributor. We don't have a net contribution from Wales because of the imbalance, because most of the money goes to the farming industry in Wales under this ludicrous cap situation. When the other parties talk about reform in the European Union, it's absolute nonsense. They've been trying to reform the cap situation in Europe for the last 40 years. All they've done is tinker around the edges of it. So there will be no reform in Europe. David Cameron will not get any great differences with regard to the regulations that Europe pour out to us, because the other leaders of Europe have told him that. So, there will be no reform within Europe.
Okay then. Well, I think we've talked enough about whether we should be in or out of Europe. I want to actually talk about the things that, as a voter, I want to know about you guys. I mean, all the talk, certainly in the media, has been about in or out of Europe. And when we've been talking about it in the office and people have talked about, people actually want to know what your policies are, what you're standing for, because none of that has come out so far. I'm going to do that it's going to have to be a quick 30-second answer to this question. And I'm going to start with UKIP and work my way back around that way.
Okay, well, first of all, if you watched the Labour Party broadcast the other day, you'll notice that it never even mentioned Europe in that broadcast. This is the European elections, and they were afraid to even mention Europe in it. What UKIP stands for is very simple. We want to come out with out of the political union with Europe and go back to a trading partnership with our friends in Europe. We don't want this huge blizzard of regulations which is pouring out of Europe on a daily basis. It's stifling our businesses. There's just been a new directive come out of Europe which is going to affect all the small welders in Wales and the rest of the United Kingdom. It's going to cost them something like £25,000 to £45,000 just to comply with those new directives.
Okay, thank you for that, David. Next, we've got Brian from the Socialist Party of Great Britain.
Well, the SPGB is standing this European elections primarily to provide the electorate with a viable, radical, revolutionary alternative to the present system of capitalism, profits, wages, and outright slavery in many instances, as we're finding out now. What we propose is a moneyless, classless, stateless, borderless society without leaders, without markets, production for use, and free access to human needs. That's it.
Okay, thank you for that, Brian. And next we've got Andrew from Socialist Labour.
Okay, so as I've previously said, the Socialist Labour Party is fundamentally for Britain and Wales's withdrawal from the European Union. Others here have said that the European Union can be reformed, or that they want to see reforms from within the European Union. That is very difficult, if not nigh on impossible, to achieve. It only takes one member state of the European Union to block any reform or any change from happening for it not to go through. So, and as I've already alluded to, the democracy of the European Union is quite often found wanting. In terms of opposing the free market, privatisation and austerity agendas, we're against the free movement of capital and labour within the European Union. That is seeking to drive down wages and working conditions across Europe. The privatisation agenda has led to the privatisation of our utility companies, which, as we've seen, everybody's struggling with increased utility bills.
Okay, Andrew, I've got a lot of people to get in, so you've had your 30 seconds there. Thank you. Next up, we've got Ioan from Plaid Cymru.
Thanks, Jane. Unlike other parties, my loyalty and the loyalty of my party, Plaid Cymru, is with the people of Wales, and we can always be trusted to put Wales first in Europe. If you look at the evidence over the past 15 years, Plaid Cymru has voted in the best interests of Wales in Brussels when it comes to jobs, transport, or the environment. No other party acts entirely and solely in the best interests of your family, your community and Wales. And we don't have to answer to any bosses from London.
Okay, thank you. Next, we've got Rob from No to EU.
Yeah, No to EU, Yes to Workers' Rights is actually an alliance of a range of organisations, including the RMT, Rail and Transport Union, the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, the Indian Workers Association. All of us are active on all the different campaigning fronts against policies of austerity, privatisation, the judgments of the EU Court of Justice undermining trade union and employment rights. Instead, we think workers' rights should be expanded, we think the anti-trade union laws should be repealed, and we think that industries like energy and transport should be, like the banks, should be in public ownership.
Thank you, Rob. Next, we've got Alec from the Liberal Democrats.
The European Union is getting more and more democratic. We want to see that go on. We want to see the Commission being held to account and the President of the Commission being elected. We want to see that our ministers go to the Council of Ministers reporting back to the House of Commons before and after, so that we see how that part of the democracy works. We want to see the single market improved so that there is a competition for service industries and that is made more effective. We want to go on seeing the regulation so there's a level playing field and people are fair on workers' rights and protection of consumer rights and so on. And we want to see climate change targets being strengthened, because the European Union is the place to deal with that, because it's only by countries working together we can deal with damage to the global atmosphere.
Okay. I just wanted to say there, actually, that I usually get about 20 to 30 press releases from all the political parties sent to me every day, and I've only had one about the European Union elections, and that was from the Lib Dems, actually. But I haven't had a single one off anybody else, so there you go. Right, next up we have got Alex from the Labour Party.
Jane, I'll try and remedy that in 30 seconds. 5 policies, 30 seconds. €1 trillion of tax lost every year to avoidance and evasion. That's fundamentally wrong. We will do something about that. We will push for strong measures on exploitative zero-hours contracts. We will complete the single market in energy and telecoms, reducing the cost of living for many people around Europe. And finally, we will bring in ambitious targets for the reduction of greenhouse gases to save our environment. Thank you.
Okay, very short and sweet. Thank you for that. Next up, we've got Pippa from the Green Party.
Well, there's one thing that hasn't been discussed here, and the Greens are standing up for that, and that is the next generation. We have to leave this environment fit for the next generation. Young people are voting Green. It's very exciting for us to see the young vote turning towards the Greens, because we have the strong, the bold, the courageous policies and the courageous politicians who are going to fight to leave our environment fit for the future. And there are other things. The rights of women. Women in Wales are still earning an average of 19% less for doing the same job as a man. This is something, despite equal opportunities legislation, that is not being properly addressed. It's just been left, and Greens really will stand up for women at every level. There, of course, absolute dire necessity to combat the worst effects of climate change, and Greens for 40 years have been working on this. Our policies are all in the public domain. Anyone can go onto the website and read about our values, our policies and the things that we stand for. So please, I encourage you to go to the Green Party website and take a look for yourself.
Okay, thank you for that, Pippa. And finally, Kay from the Conservative Party.
The Welsh Conservative Manifesto was launched having achieved a stronger economy at home, renewed respect abroad, and a promise to deliver real change in Europe. And so the 3 priorities that I will leave you with today will be that we desperately need to complete that single market. It's the reason why we all want to be part of the EU, and it's the reason why our businesses actually thrive. It's about growth and jobs in that single market. We desperately also need to cut red tape. We've started the job. We need to be there in large numbers to actually make sure we finish it. to get exemptions from EU legislation where possible for all our small Welsh businesses. But we also need at the heart of our priorities to have a reform agenda. We can reform the EU. We've already started with the fisheries policy, with the agriculture policy, and indeed with the budget itself. And I really do desperately want the return of many of the social and employment legislation to national governments, not just the UK, but to every member state, so that we legislate at the right level, not always at the highest level.
OK, thank you for that. Right, we do need to take an advertisement break now, but we will be back again in a couple of minutes.
Listening to News, Views and Interviews. The Way It Is in Cardiff with Jane Morris. Mondays to Thursdays, 1 till 1:30 on Radio Cardiff 98.7 FM.
OK then, well, welcome back to our Radio Cardiff News, Views and Interviews. European elections special. We're all getting rather hot in here, and it's not the politics, it's just the temperature, hopefully. Right, let's move on with another question. Oh, actually, before I do that, don't forget you can get involved too. If you drop me a text on 07728 758 759 if you've got any questions, comments, or anything else you want to say. Right, where should we go? I know, we'll go with this question. OK, should the European Union, which we are a part of, financially support poorer EU countries and regions? And I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to answer this. And I'm going to start with Alec and work my way around that way, just to change it around a little bit. OK.
Yes, it should. Wales has benefited hugely from the kind of funding, the structural funding that is all about trying to help less advantaged regions within member states to catch up with their gross domestic product to get more wealthy. It's something to be done where you want to have as permanent effect as possible, and something you don't want to be going on doing forever. So hopefully, at least this round, I don't know about the first round of Welsh funding, but this round is going to have that effect, and Wales is going to catch up.
OK, I'm going to... we'll go to Rob, actually, because if I start going backwards, I'll get confused myself.
Well, I don't know whether the millions of victims of EU austerity policies in Greece, Portugal, Spain, Cyprus and elsewhere think that the EU does them any favours. And these are some of the poorer regions, certainly of Western Europe. Increasingly, what little proportion of the EU budget goes towards helping less developed regions and poorer regions, increasingly will go eastwards. Let's not forget, more than 50% of the EU budget still is spent on farmers, mainly wealthy farmers. And what little we get back in Wales and elsewhere is far outweighed by the net contributions that are made.
OK, and Johan?
Yeah, I think regional funding has been a boost for the Welsh economy. Obviously, we haven't seen the benefits so much on the ground, perhaps, as we would like, but we would want to make sure that people were able to take part and have some of that redistribution between the richest parts of the European Union to the poorest part. One of the things in this election for next Thursday that we're campaigning for is to make sure that we give a guaranteed jobs, training or education for under 25-year-olds if they've been unemployed or out of school for over 4 months, and that we could use some of that regional funding, European Social Fund money, to make that happen for people living in Cardiff and across Wales.
OK, and Andrew?
OK, so 2 points really. First of all, the money that we get from the European Union is only money that we get back. It's money that's actually collected in tax here in Britain, given to the EU, and then we get a small proportion of it back. Actually, what we should be doing, surely it's the people of Wales, an elected government here in Wales, that can surely make the best decision as with what to do with money to help develop some of our poorer and more deprived communities. The second point is actually the European Union is actually keeping communities in Britain and in Wales poor. What it's doing is it's allowing industry and business to flood out of Wales. We've seen it. You just need to look at the valleys to see what's happened to industry here in Wales. The Socialist Labour Party.
Okay, Andrew, I'm going to have to cut you
short
there now. Next up is Brian.
Now, this regional funding reminds me very much of trade union negotiations, because what's actually happening is that you're scrambling for the crumbs that's put in front of you on the table, instead of looking at the possibility of not only taking over the table, but also taking over the bakery, plus the land that grows the corn. Yes, I'm talking about common ownership. And there's nothing wrong with common ownership, because it's been in existence long, and for more years than the capitalist system or any monetary system whatsoever. It's been practiced and still practiced in many parts of the world. It's just a matter that the present wage slaves have got to be prepared to take over the capitalist system and abolish the wage slavery and profit system for what it stands for.
Okay, thank you, Brian. And next up we've got David.
Well, the UK Independence Party would obviously say that it should be down to the British government to decide how and where the British money is distributed throughout Europe and to whom. There is absolutely nothing wrong with helping the poorer regions within Europe, but if it amounts to what's happened in Wales, where we've had billions of pounds of funding, it's almost all gone to the social sector and not to private enterprise. It hasn't benefited Wales in any way whatsoever, because Derek Vaughan was able to go to the European Parliament and argue the fact that we're still one of the poorest regions in Wales in order to get an extra funding from it. So it's certainly not working for Wales, and it's certainly not working for the other parts of Europe, as has been pointed out, Portugal, Greece and all the other poorer parts of Europe.
Okay, thank you for that, David. And we'll go to Kay next, please.
Thank you. Yes, the European Union should support weaker countries. They should actually be there to provide countries with the ability to become more competitive. And that's what they really are. They are competitiveness funds rather than anything else. And there, of course, are structural funds coming to Wales. In all honesty, not one of us actually got those funds to Wales. They come, as a matter of fact, because we qualified. We qualified because we're one of the poorest regions, not just of the UK, but of the Western European member states. We really are on a par with certain parts of Romania, which is shocking and shouldn't be the case at all. So we've had 2 rounds of funding already. They have failed to deliver for us in Wales, so we need to change the way we're spending that money in the next round. And certainly for me, it's about generating jobs. It's about needing to invest those EU funds in companies, particularly into our small and medium-sized enterprises around Wales. They know how to generate jobs, how to generate economic growth. They are the backbone of our economy, and we need to trust them to spend this money wisely next time round. I do think it can happen, but we shouldn't forget that there's other pots of money out there that we can get to. And certainly the research and innovation funds, I'm getting increasing numbers of Welsh companies coming to me to ask for help in getting access to that 80 billion euros worth of funds. And they're increasingly being successful. We will continue to help them do that.
Okay, thank you, Kay. And Pippa, please.
Well, there are 2 main points I'd like to make here. One is, surely it's down to all of us to look after the poorer in society. It's not just down to governments to make rules about it. We've all seen the trickle-down effect of capitalism has not worked. And we have seen even worse. We've seen a type of economic sadism visited on the poorest in our own society. And I would like to say that these things are a matter of individual purpose and value, and that we all have our part to play in that. Governments will do what governments will do. Money will come, will go. We need people to have a good quality of life. We need people not to be in fuel poverty. We need people not to be at the mercy of large multinational corporations, which we've seen even today in the news have been fixing prices on fuel bills and energy costs for ordinary households. So, of course, the European government should be supporting the poorest, but we should all be. And as for how the money is spent, I would say, yes, thank you, Europe. Yes, we have this money because the West Wales and the valleys are as poor as Romania. But it's how that money is spent that's important. It's not just the money itself. And I believe this Welsh Assembly government has not been spending that money to the benefit of people in this area.
OK, thank you for that, Pippa. And we've got Alex from the Labour Party.
An absolute and emphatic yes to that. Improving the economy of one region benefits us all. To briefly, with apologies to you, and I'm afraid the Labour government, Welsh government, has beaten you to it with the Jobs Growth Wales Fund, which is European funded and has brought youth unemployment down below any other region in the UK. To briefly come back to Kay's point, 3 weeks ago I was standing on the new science campus of Swansea University, which is European funded and which is going to bring thousands of jobs into Swansea. I'd like to see more of that.
OK, I think Johan wanted to come back on that.
Can I just say, with the Jobs Growth Wales that the Welsh Government has put forward, that is just seen as a temporary measure. It's not one of the... It's because of the way the economy is at the moment on its knees, and it's not because... so what we would want to do is to be far more radical and a far more wider sort of to grab people rather than just talk about the few people who are coming up from, say, university. We want to be a lot more clearer about trying to make sure that those people between 16 to 24 get the sort of opportunities that they need. Heaven knows, we know that we could see the industry in Cardiff Bay and the businesses, but the people in Butte Town and Grangetown, we don't often see the benefits of all those businesses. So that's what we want to do.
OK, I just wanted to throw something into the mix actually on Jobs Growth Wales, because I mean Jobs Growth Wales is, it's a great scheme. It's for 16 to 25-year-olds, but actually there's nothing out there for anyone over 25, and there's a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and there's no funding to actually, well, that we can find to actually support those people and get those people back into work. Actually, I will go to Pippa first on that one, and I'll come back to you, Rob. OK.
I worked for the Welsh Assembly government once, and I was always horrified that this need to put people into neat little packages of age groups. Of course, when you're 25, your needs are the same as when you're 24 if you're looking for work. I don't believe in parcelling people or even countries up into neat little packages. Greens believe in a Europe of the regions, which of course puts the regional perspective at the top of the decision making and brings the decision making down to the people who will be most effective. Now this is very important for young people coming up, trying to find their way, trying to find a job. But the other thing that Greens stand for is also that we would scrap tuition fees. How can this country afford not to educate its next generation? Tuition fees across Europe are much, much cheaper than they are in England. Take a country like Finland, where they're free, and where people are constantly reaching very high standards of educational attainment. So the green package is very varied and very wide. But as far as young people are concerned, we need to make sure that they're educated at the expense of the country. And we need to make sure that these arbitrary age groups that put people in these little packages are abolished so that we can look after people properly, whatever their needs are, no matter what their age is.
OK, very quickly, I've got Rob and then Alex and OK, yes, OK. Right, we'll get you all in very quickly on this. Very quickly, Rob.
Yeah, well, despite decades of chatter about a social Europe and a social chapter and a social charter, the reality is that disparities of income, wealth, unemployment and so on between the different countries and regions of the European Union, those disparities continue to grow. That's all they've ever done, because the EU is not primarily about tackling those kind of inequalities. The EU is about the free movement of capital. It's about the right of big business to go anywhere, to withdraw from anywhere, to transfer capital, to transfer jobs to wherever it can maximise its profits.
Okay,
that's the reality.
Thank you, Rob. I saw Alex first. Okay.
To briefly come back to your point, Jane, first of all, we do have Proact and React, which are available to any age group and are for people that have recently lost their jobs and have been very, very useful. I know of at least one mine in the Neath Valley where I'm from that's benefited hugely from that. When we're talking about targeting youth unemployment, you have to remember we were looking at a generation that was going to struggle due to the mismanagement of the economy by the Tory government in London, that was struggling to get their first job, struggling to get their foot on the ladder, and that's why we prioritised that, and I do not apologise for that.
Okay, and I think I saw Kay next and then Alec, okay?
Okay, our economy is actually doing exceedingly well right now. We are the strongest growing economy in Western Europe right now and the strongest in the G8. And therefore, we are actually seeing real movement and jobs coming out, particularly from our SMEs, our small and medium-sized companies, which make up more than 95% of the jobs in Wales. We, as a Conservative-led government, have lowered corporation tax. We've lowered the national insurance costs for employers so that they can afford to take on new people in their companies. We've also reduced the burden of employment legislation on smaller businesses and increased the funding for apprenticeship schemes and made money available for upskilling. All of these things collectively start to improve the outlook for every individual, giving them skills, giving them new jobs and giving them financial security going forwards. We have a really positive story to tell right now, and that's one I'd like people to actually start to feel.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I am rushing you along because we've got less than 10 minutes to go. Alec, quickly.
I simply don't think the European Union is a kind of creator of inequality. If you look at the countries of Eastern Europe that have joined the European Union and become democratic and stable and become increasingly prosperous, I think it is an engine of equality, in fact, across Europe. And the more consumers, the more we work together, the better the economy for all of us. If you want to look at a social solidarity fund, you've got the European Social Fund, which is funding things like Chwarae Teg, which helps women in Wales to get into work of all ages and is doing fantastic work to address those fundamental inequalities that we were talking about earlier. So Liberal Democrats support.
Okay. I have had a text message in here. It says everybody talks about jobs and training, but nothing happens when they get in. It's just for the votes. Okay, actually, I'll take UKIP on this, and then I do want to move on because we are running out of time.
It's all very well to talk about jobs and training, but when you tell that to the people of Miskin, who've just lost 900 skilled jobs at the Bosch plant, that Bosch plant was moved directly to Hungary, and it was British regional aid money that actually helped build the brand new plant in Hungary, and the people in Miskin had to go and train those people in Hungary to take their jobs. That's absolutely appalling. They were 900 skilled jobs. When the Rover plant went through with 25,000 engineering jobs, we were actually using our money, or the Europeans were using our money, to build a brand new factory in the Czech Republic for a Skoda factory there for the German car giant Volkswagen. We exported 25,000 engineering jobs, and this is what the European Union is about. My colleagues are right in saying it's all about big business being able to do whatever they want to by moving people and jobs and businesses all the way across Europe.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to stop that now because I've got one more question, which is a yes/no answer. That's all I want from you, and then you're going to have the chance to do your closing statements. Okay, so to fit that in, right then, do you think that MEPs should have sanctions applied to their salaries in the same way that benefit claimants do if they don't take part in at least 50% of official European Parliament votes? And I'm going to start with Kay on that one as a standing MEP.
Absolutely.
Okay. Pippa?
Yes, I agree.
Alex?
Derek has one of the best voting records in the Parliament. Yes, from all of us.
Okay, Alex?
Sounds a good idea to me.
No, totally opposed. I think MEPs should be outside the European Parliament doing something useful by supporting ordinary people when they're fighting to improve their living standards.
Okay, so that's a no then, thank you. Ewan?
Yes, from Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales.
Andrew?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, Brian?
Makes no difference whatsoever.
Okay, and David?
Yes, a definite yes to that.
Right, okay, right. Now, you've all got a 30-second closing statement that you want to give to the listeners to basically persuade them why they should be voting for your party next Thursday, the 22nd. I'm going to start in the middle with Rob and No to EU.
Well, if you want a professional politician who's going to go to Brussels and pretend that they're having any real impact on the laws that are actually decided by the European Central Bank and the European Commission and the EU Court of Justice, you'd better vote for somebody else. If you want an MEP, on the other hand, who'll be there alongside you campaigning against the bedroom tax and austerity and privatisation and giving a voice to the struggles of ordinary people, vote no to EU, yes to workers' rights.
OK, thank you, Rob. And next we have got Ioan Bellin from Plaid Cymru.
Thanks. If you look at the evidence over the past 15 years, only Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales, has put the best interest of Wales in Brussels. When it comes to jobs, transport or the environment, no other party acts entirely and solely in the best interest of your family, your community and Wales. Please re-elect Plaid Cymru for another 5 years. Wales cannot afford to be silenced. We will provide that strong voice that Wales needs, and we will always put Wales first, and we will always put Cardiff first. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Next, we've got Andrew Jordan from Socialist Labour.
OK, so the Socialist Labour Party is opposing the European Union's free market, privatisation and austerity agendas. All of the agendas, all of the things that are making and keeping communities in Wales worse off. That's why we're calling for Britain's immediate withdrawal from the European Union. We believe that the European Union isn't democratic. The Socialist Labour Party believes that the people of Wales should be the people that decide what happens here in Wales. We believe we should be able to control our own economic policies. All of the parties in this election will keep us tied into austerity, privatisation, the free market. Only the Socialist Labour Party is committed to bringing prosperity to the people of Wales.
Thank you for that, Andrew. I only have about 5 seconds over there. Next, we've got Brian Johnson from the Socialist Party of Great Britain.
Well, this afternoon we've heard a lot of talk about reform. Reform of what? Reform of an institution that is there to ensure that the capitalist system within Europe is competitive with the rest of the trading blocs on the global system. What people need to think about is not reform of the system that enslaves them, but revolutionary action so it takes them out of the system totally altogether. In short, abolition of the wages system and direct participatory democracy, so that everybody has got a say on how to produce and distribute human needs.
Thank you for that, Brian. And now we've got David Rowlands from UKIP.
OK, the UK Independence Party are the only party that's strong enough, large enough and to influence all the rest of the parties with regard to Europe. We are the party that will bring reform. We'll bring reform by coming out of the European Union. You are voting in this election for just 4 MEPs out of a parliament of 750 odd. Much better to have 40 MPs in the Houses of Parliament. Much more democracy involved there.
OK, thank you for that. Next, we've got Kay Swinburne from the Conservative Party.
Thank you. It's been an honour and a privilege to be a member of the European Parliament on behalf of Wales for the last 5 years. And I hope during that time I've provided Wales with a very strong voice and have made a significant difference on legislation in the European Parliament. And only the Conservatives can fix our relationship with Europe and make sure it changes in a way that delivers growth, jobs and financial security. And we, of course, will give the British people a say in an in-out referendum by the end of 2017. Labour and the Lib Dems won't give you one. UKIP, Plaid Cymru and the other parties can't deliver one. So reform, renegotiation and a referendum, only the Conservatives can deliver that.
OK, thank you for that, Kay. And Pippa Bartolotti from the Green Party.
The Green Party is passionate about a more thoughtful politics. Young people are voting Green and the polls are bearing this out. We're very clear that we need to leave this environment fit for the future, for their future, not for us. We're very clear that it's, to paraphrase or to misquote another electoral line, it's not the economy, stupid. It's about health. It's about quality of life. It's about opportunities for self-advancement. We really need to start forgetting the monetary measure of life and start looking at the real qualities of life that we all appreciate. And we need to be working for energy security and for a clean, renewable future. So if you don't want business as usual, vote Green.
OK, thank you for that, Pippa. Next we've got Alex Thomas for the Labour Party.
In the last budget round, Derek Vaughan, your Labour MEP, secured an extra £500 million of European funding for Wales. And every Labour MEP you elect is going to fight for action on climate change, tax avoidance, zero-hours contracts, and for action and improvements for jobs and growth. So for a fairer, greener, more prosperous Wales, pleidleisio llawer, vote Labour. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Alex. And finally, we've got Alec Dauncey for the Liberal Democrats.
The Welsh Liberal Democrats are Wales's clearest party of in, because we think being in Europe means being in work. We are where we are. We've all seen how fragile our economy can be. We need to get stuck into making Europe work and not putting Welsh jobs at risk. We're the only party in the UK, at the UK level, that's had the courage to stand up against UKIP and the Eurosceptic media. We've got the clearest vision of an open, modern, tolerant, progressive Wales in Britain, in Europe.
OK, well, I'd just like to finally say thank you all for coming in today. Actually, I'll switch the fan back on again now. It hasn't been... it's been rather hot in here, so thank you for bearing with us with all that. Thank you for all coming in, and hopefully that'll give our listeners some food for thought, and people out there will actually vote next Thursday, because that's the most important thing.
Yeah, whatever you do, vote.
Yeah. OK then, right, I'm going to let you all escape from this hot box now, and we need to go to the news. It's actually just gone 2:01, and I'll be back with the Friday show in a minute.
The sound of the capital city, Radio Cardiff.
Radio Cardiff News.